Welcome to the Battlefield Show. I'm your host, Sage Goodwin, and as always, I'm joined by Sammy Boy. How you doing, man?
I'm doing well, man. How are you?
Doing pretty good. Ready to talk some Battlefield. And today, we're going to be talking about the Battlefield core feedback on the maps and the next steps they're taking on those new changes. So, let's jump right into things. This podcast is a production of Uplink Media Group. Uplink is a podcast network dedicated to highlighting the love and experience of gaming and pop culture. Check out our other shows, Star Wars Uplink and The Forge, the Halo Infinite podcast, as well as our YouTube channels for even deeper dives into Battlefield, Star Wars, and more. YouTube.com/Uplink podcast and StarWarsUplink.com. We always know this is going to happen anytime we switch up our recording schedule. Was it the next day after we recorded last episode that they
yeah, which is weird because I think this was meant to be dropping this week, as in it probably would have dropped like today. They said that it was scheduled for, or I guess they said it was scheduled for early April. So I guess it wasn't.
Yeah.
I assumed it was going to be this week, and then literally we finished recording and like I reckon it was like 12 hours after we finished.
Yeah.
I just see a notification saying the new feedback loop's out, and I'm like, my God, we just recorded.
I just finished cleaning this mess. Can it stay clean for 5 minutes? But yeah, we've got details on kind of the feedback loop that they're working on. Like honestly, yes, let's get the pre-recorded section out of the way where it's like, oh hey, this should have all been done in the beginning with all of the content creators in the creator network. That's kind of like the thing that they made the creator network for in the first place, but now it's happening definitely at a larger scale than that team would have been, but
yeah,
we're getting it. I'm glad that they have actually started and we're seeing actions on that feedback loop. Obviously it's not as quick as we would have wanted, but
yeah, it's been a weird like period, hasn't it? Where they've done their initial announcement of like, okay, we kind of messed up and here's how we're going to fix it, and then it kind of went quiet again, and it was a bit like, oh God, is this even going to happen? Or like, what's going on?
Here we go again.
It is good to finally get some actual like evidence that they have been putting in work. Because I was actually really happy with this blog post, and it was something that after the first one I was a little bit skeptical. The first one didn't really grab me that much, and so it is a good. There's still a lot of stuff to do, and it's not perfect, the stuff that they've shown us, but it's a good direction that they're taking, I think. And yeah, it's just nice to finally see that, we're only probably 2 months away from this actually being in game, and they're saying that the April update's going to be pretty big. So it's been a long 6 months, but it looks like we're finally just on the cusp of starting to actually get some traction.
Yeah, definitely. It's crazy to think it's been 6 months. I saw some discussions last week. I think it was Westy was sharing the amount of maps that we got in the same amount of time frame in the previous Battlefield games, and even Battlefront 2. Honestly, I think we had quite a bit of content for Battlefront 2, even with that gigantic controversy of a launch by this time frame. Battlefield 5 had 4 maps? A couple were
3 or 4, I think.
Yeah, and then there was Battlefield 1 had 6, Battlefield 4 had 12, or something along those lines, some crazy amount of numbers.
Mental.
And then Battlefield 3 had 3 or 4, something like that.
Yeah.
But
it's a good comparison. It was good to actually see that, especially because even Battlefield 4 like that. At that point, it was still struggling. Like, it wasn't like they had fixed it. It was still a rough game when they had done those 12 maps. So it's weird to see. I guess obviously the scale is a big factor, but it's crazy to see that they still put out 12 maps while
12 is a big number.
The game. Yeah, that's essentially, there would have been 8 maps at launch in Battlefield 4. I feel like there was maybe 10, but I think there was 8. So they literally more than doubled the map count in a matter of 6 months, plus overhauling literally overhauling the entire game. It was absolutely busted. So it's kind of crazy to see the comparison there, because this is kind of in that same boat where they're really almost overhauling this game, yet there's been no content on top of that. So it's a very different situation.
It is, and I think a lot of people forget, or we have this tendency to have these feelings and then not actually take the time to look at the data. But now that we see the data, it's like, no, my feelings are 100% grounded in like actual fact that says, oh, hey, I'm pretty sure we had an experience where we got a lot more in the past. And I think that's ultimately comes down to just the scale that they tried to accomplish. And DICE was definitely compensating for something else, a lack of something.
Yeah.
And just kind of the scale, it's there's this belief that you have to go always bigger, always better. You have to always be pushing forward just for the sake of pushing forward. And I think they definitely found the max there of like, okay, yeah, we may have wanted to focus on a fewer maps, but then make those maps just bigger. But they didn't really take the value in it and say, hey, this is what we really need. But getting into kind of like what happened here. So previously they had launched a what are they calling these? The core feedback loop for Battlefield, and they talked about the changes that they're making to the was it Kaleidoscope? I think it was.
Yeah.
They're talking about that. It was on March 2nd. They shared the core feedback initiative, helping. This is a quote: helping to outline what it is that we've seen and heard from you since we launched the game, and how we're keen to discuss the ways in which we are bringing improvements to the game, asking for your thoughts on our plans along the way. So that's good. I mean, we're starting to see that come into fruition. And the first thing that they wanted to focus on was one of the biggest issues with the game, which is traversal. And he said, for traversal, we outlined that travel time on foot between base spawn and flags was too long. Our proposed solution is to reduce overall travel time between these areas by moving them closer together. We shared that the first map in need of changes is Kaleidoscope, which through your feedback, you've confirmed to us the right call. However, you also shared with us that Renewal is another map that really needs to see changes made to it. We heard you on that, and we're looking to deliver a refreshed version of Renewal alongside Kaleidoscope as part of Season 1 this summer. I want to stop there because this is good.
Yep.
They're starting to, I mean, we had this discussion in a previous episode, that they need to do a lot more than just one map change.
Yeah, that was a big thing for me. That, like I said just before, the initial feedback loop, I was a bit disappointed because I was assuming they were going to talk about like heaps of maps, and they just talked about Kaleidoscope. So that was probably the biggest, downfall from that one. But to take on our feedback, and they did listen, and they kind of went, okay, one isn't enough, let's do two now, which is still, I think, realistically, I would have thought they'd still be able to do more than that. But like, looking at the way that the game's gone, we can't expect them to just do all 7 at once or something. They're obviously just trying to catch up so much.
That's what they need to do, but it's not necessarily the thing that they can really do. Yeah. I don't think.
It seems like they've... I also think it must be because they're focusing more on future content as well. Like, I think that one thing that maybe makes me feel a bit more positive is that if they're not going to focus so much on all 7 of these maps, maybe that's because they're hopefully putting more work into future maps. So I guess we'll have to wait and see. Because if they were doing all 7 at once, then I'd be worried, like, oh, okay, that's good, but we're probably not going to get a new map for like another year. So I guess if they can try and strike that balance of doing enough of these maps while also, hopefully putting out, like, hopefully a map a season, I think would be, realistic for most other games out there.
Yeah.
I think that's because the scale of these maps, I've heard in the past, I'm sure you've heard it too, with like Geonosis in Battlefront 2, that took them a year to make that map. So that's, I think people expecting 2 maps per season is a bit much. That's, even in the old games, those maps were so much smaller. That's why they could put more out. So
yeah. But I think that too, like you can look at that and say, hey, I think there's a value in having more maps, obviously, because you have a lot more opportunity to hit. Like if you're throwing 3 maps out there, you're saying, oh, hey, maybe one of them hits and then we can find out what that is like, or maybe 2 of them hit. Yeah. Maybe all 3 of them hit. But if you only have 1 and it's bad, then you have a lot more riding on that one map than if you did 3 smaller ones. So I think there is advantages and disadvantages to each path forward. And they also said in this game in particular, they used a lot of like machine learning and AI to help design some of the instances of the map build out to make it faster. And I think they said in a blog post that they were looking at about 6 months for a map versus the previous 12 months that it normally took.
I wonder if that like is why these maps aren't that good. I wonder if it's because I don't want to sound disrespectful, but it sounds like they cut corners. It just sounds like they went, okay, let's just make this faster, which is on paper good. If they could make the maps of the same quality as the previous games in half the time, obviously that's awesome. And I think that type of tech will evolve to where it's reliable in the future. I've never seen really any games do that before. I think there's been some that have like, you know, slightly meddled in that before, but it's obviously somewhat new tech. So in the future, I'm sure that'll work out, but I feel like that's a lot of the reason why these maps just aren't that great, because a lot of it was probably essentially just AI generated, and then they've like, you know, added stuff to it to make it actually playable. But yeah, it'd be interesting to know. I would love to, like, that's the type of stuff I would love to just get behind the scenes access to and see how that happens and what they do to change the initial plans and all that kind of thing, to see how much like manual work they actually did on it to make them the way that they are. Yeah. Because it could just be the fact that, like the AI software just didn't work as well as they wanted, and that's why the maps are kind of not as good, and now they're trying to fix them. So definitely interesting talking point.
It is, and it's really cool tech. Like that pairing of things is really cool. But again, unless you're heavily working with those AI to train it in a way that one offers, I mean, you have to train this because AI is so specific. If you put it in this way, it's going to make it that way. It's not going to just like randomly throw something out. I mean, it could happen depending on how clean your code is and how good those algorithms are. But most of the time it's like, hey, we're going to implement this. We're going to load in with a lot of different content and details, and it's going to go crazy. Like if you look at Minecraft with its procedural generation, you look at No Man's Sky with its procedural generation. But pairing that technology with a set single map and then finishing it up, like that's a very unique process. And again, they're not going to get better at it unless they use it, but they do need to get better at it.
Yeah, 100%. I think it's like the type of thing that it's good that they're using it, and it sucks that it has to, you know, if this is why these maps aren't like that good, it kind of sucks that they have to be that way. But I think for future games that will just kind of the same as all the other issues with this game. It sucks right now, but in the future, it really could turn out to be amazing. Like in the next, maybe not the next game, but maybe the game after the next game, it's in a really good spot, and everything about that game is just like way faster. They can put out like 3 maps a season. So I think it's worth kind of biting the bullet and just taken, like, this game has already taken an L. You may as well just stick to your guns with like trying to improve all that type of stuff, and, you know, work with the new engine and just improve for the future rather than trying, you know, too hard to fix this game. I think they definitely should still do their best with it, but I think it's all good to be learning for the future anyway. So it's not the end of the day.
Learn from the failures, implement on the technology that could be cool and speed up different pathways in the future, but you definitely need to also focus on bringing good content to this game. And then this is an interesting point that I wonder if this is just like a one person said it and a lot of people are like agreeing with it, whether or not it's a good decision for the game itself. But I said another feedback point was that you'd like us to shift focus away from traversal by foot by ensuring that there are more transport vehicles active on the map. Increasing the number of active vehicles on the map isn't something we can do as a short-term solution, as this has the potential to impact our separate work or improving game performance. But we do hear you on this, and we want to do what we can to approach the problem from different angles. One of the ways in which we think we can limit the amount of time spent on foot is to change the distribution of vehicles across our selected pools. We're currently exploring how gameplay changes when the two-seater M5C Bolt featured as part of the armored vehicle pool, and MAV instead shows up as up in the transport vehicles category, as well as shifting the MD540 Nightbird out into the attack helicopter pool, ensuring that the air transport is more readily available in the round. This is like one of those things that I think people threw around as like a band-aid, but I don't think they should shift focus away from traversal by foot to focus on adding more transport vehicles. I think that's just a bad band-aid to fix a problem that's more integral to the map layout.
Yeah, I agree with that. I do think in an ideal world, I to an extent agree with them that, you know, it'd be great to have a lot more just like quad bikes and really like small vehicles around the map. I think that would help because there's really not that many. Like in old games, I swear there was just quad bikes just sort of chilling in the most random
everywhere.
spots. You could just grab them, yeah. And in this game, it feels like there's not really. I know, like on Orbital, for example, there's those like the white, essentially like the trucks that are just kind of, there's like a few scattered around. But yeah, if they could add more of that, I think that's good. But in terms of like actual vehicles that you can get from the deployment menu, I don't know if that's really that. Yeah, I don't know. More vehicles to me doesn't fix the problem. I think it's more just to do with like the spawns and the distance between all the flags and stuff like that, which they're obviously working on that too. So hopefully that kind of fixes it a bit. But
I don't think they should quote unquote shift focus from that to offering more transport options. I think that's more of the community right now being so hardcore and being that echo chamber that like there's such a small group there that the people that usually are still there and still offering that are like playing vehicles mostly, so that you're going to get a lot of that vehicle heavy focus of like, no, don't take away vehicles, just add more transport ones, it'll be great. When I mean, this is ultimately should be a infantry focused first game with vehicles and air transports and air combat vehicles as like a secondary push forward for the objective and not be the main focus.
Yeah, it's a first-person shooter. It needs to be a shooter with the vehicles complementing the gameplay. It shouldn't be the other way around. Because right now, I don't know which one. Like, I think obviously there are still more people playing as infantry, so I wouldn't say it's more a vehicle simulator with like a couple of people walking around. Like it's still more focused on infantry, but it's so close that you just can't really tell, and obviously vehicles just dominate, so that's just not the way that it should be. And I think in all the previous games, like there was kind of there was just a perfect balance where the vehicles were strong enough that when you see a tank, you go, oh shit, there's a tank, I gotta get away. But you don't then run into another tank when you turn the corner. Like it's right now, there's just a tank. You run away. There's another tank. You climb up a ladder to get on a roof, and there's a chopper. It's just like it's so oversaturated at the moment. And like you said, they should be focusing on infantry. It's not that you have to only focus on infantry. You can still have the vehicle gameplay. It's worked in all the previous games, but it's a first-person shooter. It's not a vehicle simulator. And if they want it to be that, make it a separate mode. Make tank warfare or something. Like, I just don't think that's what this game. Most people who play Battlefield don't go maining vehicles. I'd say like I would imagine about 90% of people are similar to you and me, where like I'll jump in a vehicle every now and then, but I'm playing with my weapon. Like that's what I'm playing for. So. Yeah, I just don't think they should focus on the vehicles, which they do get into that later on, that they're actually reducing it. So hopefully they go that way.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and before we get to that section, they're also focusing on cover and line of sight, which is good. I think they're starting to make some really good decisions in terms of like the feeling of Battlefield 2042. And this is what they say. In our first post, we detailed that there wasn't enough cover available across maps to ensure safety when traveling between flags. Additionally, we highlighted that there aren't enough line of sight blockers, introducing an unintended increase on the number of long-range engagements. You've asked us to ensure that when we are moving around both flags and objectives to new areas, that we're also working to ensure that sufficient cover is available in their new locations. We hear you on that, and work is already underway that helps to ensure that standard is upheld. We believe that this should also resolve line of sight issues that have been highlighted by you. And they show some images on some of the ways that they are intending to add further cover via obstacles, and then also elevating certain terrain to block some line of sight, which is good. They showed a few different images, bunkers. They added more just terrain, rocks that you climb over, more verticality there. They added some blockers on ramps. They added more ramps. They added some different boxes as like impromptu more like character seasoning on the maps to add some boxes as for cover. And then I think the coolest thing to me is the bunker that they added. It looks really cool. It definitely has more of the feeling that, hey, we're in a war, and the people that are in the war aren't like warriors. They're just regular Joes.
Yeah. I was actually really happy with all the images they showed of the cover, because like we've both said it on previous episodes that I was really worried their idea of more cover was literally just putting like a shipping container in the open.
It's good, guys. Cover. We have a shipping container.
Yeah. So the stuff that picture they've shown of Sector G1, where it's like the cemented area near the buildings, that is like really good. There's still a little bit of openness in the bottom right there, but the rest of it, that honestly looks really good to me. And it's not just random things. It actually kind of looks like it suits a war. There's like the cement little sort of barriers that you can't drive past, and there's that little shipping container like building, so that, you know, that could be a little headquarters and stuff like that. Like, it actually makes sense. So I'm really happy with that. That's probably the biggest positive I took from the whole blog post, I think.
Yeah, definitely. I'm not 100% sure, like, I know that there are changes, and I see some certain changes, but I don't think they're drastic enough on what is the name of the other one? Just Kaleidoscope. Renewal. Yeah. Like, to me, it's like, okay, that looks basically the same.
Yeah, I actually don't know. The one of the fields, I think like that it looks exactly just a shipping container in the middle of the field. That's like, we were just joking about that, but that actually looks like that. So that one I'm not too sure on, because the big blue like rail thing there, that was already there. That's all the you know, currently in the map. And then the other one with the solar field
did
thing,
what we were just joking about.
the one
Don't
in
worry,
the solar
guys,
field,
we have 12 of them now.
That part of the map isn't even populated, is it? That's why I was confused. The renewal stuff was a bit...
like, I barely go there anytime I've played that map.
Yeah. Although, I guess that could be breakthrough.
I think that circular one is a point on one of the modes.
Yeah, it is a flag, but it's just like out of the way. But looking at it now, I think it's actually meant to be breakthrough. So maybe you start on the...
Yeah.
In the area where the solar panels are, and then you've got to push into that sector. Maybe that's what they're going for. If that's the case, that's better than I was expecting. But yeah, I didn't really get the renewal ones. I was more... I was happy with the kaleidoscope stuff, but the renewal things, I was just like, what? I don't even know what's different there.
Yeah, I think that's a failing of the layout of these posts. They don't have comparisons like they did in the previous one.
Yeah.
So I think that's the biggest issue. It's like, hey guys, look at this. Well, I can't really see a difference here.
Yeah, most people
they're the same picture.
This probably haven't played for like 2 months anyway, so we're all just like, I can't even remember what the map looked like in the first place.
And also, Renewal is one of my least favorite maps on there.
Yeah.
So like, anytime I see that,
I love the look and the vibe of it, but it just doesn't play well. It's probably in both modes, I think it's my least favorite.
Yeah, same here. Kaleidoscope, like I hate the look of it, but I enjoy playing it. So it's kind of like the reverse there.
Yeah. Yeah.
But yeah, Kaleidoscope is just not my favorite. It needs more foundational work than just this. Like, honestly, it's like
the thing that they touched on is that they're hopefully adding a bit more grit to it, which I was really happy with. They mentioned about like we're replacing the grass with mud and covering areas in barbed wire and stuff. That is really promising to me, and I hope that one thing I'll say about the stuff they've shown us is that I'd imagine this isn't all of it. Like, I think they're going to kind of do this to each main section of the map because they've obviously it's a work in progress. They've still got months to go. So if this is all, if what they've shown us is essentially all they're doing, then I'll be a bit like, okay, that's not that good. But if they're going to do what they've done in these images to all of the map, then that'll be really good. And that elevation image, like, obviously that's only one section. But I'd imagine they'll do that to all of the grassed area. So I think in the long run, it will look a lot better and it'll play a lot better. But it's also just hard to really tell because they've only shown us a few spots and we don't know whether to think like, is this all of it? Is this the whole map change?
And we can't assume that they're going to be working on more than just what they've shown.
Yeah, that's the thing. It's with all their previous like workings with this game. It's
what you see.
If it was a previous game, I'd be thinking, oh, they're definitely going to do that to the whole map. But with this, it's like, okay, I assume they will, but like, will they? I don't actually know if they will. So it's going to be interesting to see. I'd imagine they surely. It might not be the entire map, but like the main sections. I'd imagine like, the main building on Kaleidoscope. I'm sure they'll surely touch that up a little bit. They'll put some barbed wire around or some sandbags or something. Like I can't imagine they're just going to leave that completely how it is. So we'll have to wait and see. But yeah, it's going to be interesting to see, and that'll set the tone for the next lot of maps. Like if they're only doing a few sections, then honestly, it's not worth touching the other maps. Just work on new content.
Because I think the reworking the current maps is good for current players, but if they want to bring this game back, they need new content. They need new maps. They need new to show that, hey, there is new stuff, and that this is visually different from what your previous experience of Battlefield is.
Yeah, 100%. I think it's a kind of a balancing act because they also do need to, if they don't touch these maps and then they bring in, let's just say all the new content's really good, but then all the new players that have never played, they play on the old maps, they'll be like, oh, this is terrible. So they do have to kind of strike that balance, which is going to be it's going to be a monumental thing if they can turn this game around. Like this, I think this will be maybe a bigger comeback than Battlefront 2 if this ends up turning around, which I just don't think it will to that extent. But if it gets to that level of people enjoying it, it'll be probably one of the biggest turnarounds that I've ever seen because it's in a very rough place at the moment.
Don't you remember our boy Andrew Wilson said DICE has done this before? They can do it again. Oh my gosh, like it's gonna be great. They've messed up games before and brought him back from the dead. It's fine. Except for Battlefield 5.
Well, they did, and then they just went, that'll do.
Yeah, they didn't go far enough. Another thing that they're touching on is intensity. And they said, for intensity, we outlined that especially in 128 player modes, combat can become too chaotic around our objectives, making it hard to determine what's going on around you and where you should keep your attention. You've told us that in your experience, the primary cause for this problem is vehicle dominance. They said based on that feedback, there are several changes we'll be making to reduce overall vehicle availability and uptime. They're reducing the number of attack vehicles and helicopters that can be active at any time in 128 player modes per category from 3 to 2. And they said this means you'll only be able to encounter 2 tanks and 2 helicopters available at any time instead of 3 each. And they're reducing the cooldown for attack vehicles and helicopters from 60 to 120 seconds. And as discussed earlier, the MD540 Nightbird will be moved from transport into the attack helicopter category. And the MC5 Bolt will also be moved from transport into the attack vehicle category, which is good because there's no reason that should be transport.
Yeah, it literally fits less than any other vehicle. And it was meant to be a transport. You're not really transporting many people across the map if you're using a bolt.
Yeah. Another thing they said there's two final things that they also heard from us and in the feedback from the last post. And they said they saw many of you making the suggestion that we could restrict the call-in system to only light vehicles and Ranger. This would mean that the attack vehicles would now only be available via the deploy screen. For flag areas, you've asked if these could be made larger to further spread out combat over this area. These are still ongoing discussions that we're reviewing, so whilst we haven't progressed that discussion into active changes in development, we'd love to hear from you on these two things specifically. And so I definitely want to talk about that. And I think that'll be like the main meat of this episode is what is the feedback that we could offer for that? And I want to ask you, first off, what do you think about them only being available in the deploy screen for attack vehicles?
I'm kind of torn because I feel like that is often an issue that it kind of results in a lot of people not then using them for objective play. There's nothing worse than when your teammates just won't, because you got to drive them so far to get to the action. A lot of people just go, I can't be bothered. I'm just gonna spawn in as a trooper, and then it means that the other team might have like both their tanks and their choppers defending, and the attacking team they're not using their vehicles. So that's an issue that's happened in the past that the call-in system was meant to kind of fix. That now I don't have to, if I want to get a tank and try and really push this objective, because sometimes you just need them. Now if they do that, it'll go back to how it was. So I'm not really sure I would like that, but at the same time, like, it will mean less vehicles. So I'm also kind of happy with it. I'm really not sure. I'd have to kind of see how it went. I think I don't know if I could guess how it would feel without actually playing it.
I think I'd be fine with it because that's kind of the standard of what we've had in the past. I still like I've been the brunt of this many times that I'll forget to actually get a vehicle when I spawn in, and then I'm like, frick, now they're all taken. But if they are, if they're adjusting the number of attack vehicles, I mean, that's instantly saying, oh, hey, even with the current system, it's going to be less vehicles. But also, I like the move that it would only be transport vehicles, because that's ideally like, I think that fits the flow of things a little bit better. But again, there is, like what you said, it could have an adverse effect to it and take it back in a way that doesn't really fit very well. So I think there's
maybe what they
advantages.
could do there is like have a certain area, like you have to be 100 meters from an objective to call in a tank or something like that. And if you're in that, like have kind of like a invisible circle around the objective. And if you're in that circle, you can only call in transport. Or if you go like, okay, I really need a tank, I don't want to go all the way to deployment, I don't want to have to respawn, let me just run like 30 meters backwards till I'm out of this area, and then I can call it in. Something like that could work maybe, but it's also just like a lot to, like, it'll be hard to kind of show that unless they actually show a literal circle when you're calling it in of where you have to be or something. But
what would you think of maybe limiting it to where they could only have one attack vehicle call in per game? Like, it's a special thing that you can do that way. Yeah,
maybe even like, I would love I love the squad system, like the point system where you actually earn points for your squad and the squad leader gets like X amount of points. They could use that in the same way that, you could call in the V1 rockets in Battlefield 5. Maybe it doesn't have to be the squad leader, but
it's based on playing the objective that you can have the advantage of calling in a vehicle that has an attack vehicle.
You just earn points throughout the game for, X amount of points for a kill, and you get obviously more for playing the objective and stuff. And then once you've got X amount of points, you can call in a tank or whatever. Maybe that could work. Again, that would just take a lot of extra work. They'd have to redo. They'd have to bring that in. So I don't know if that's realistic, but something like that. I think just having kind of a middle ground of not just completely deleting that, but also I do like the idea of there being less people calling in tanks. So if they can try to sort of find that middle ground of, okay, you can, but under these conditions, then I think that would be the best case.
Yeah, and that pushes the level of like play the objective that DICE is all about. So I think that would be a pretty good change there. And it makes it a thing that you can work towards and achieve as you get better in the game and make progress. So I think that's good. What do you think about the flag areas being larger to spread out that combat area?
I feel like some of them are already pretty big, to be honest.
Yeah, because it could make the game so much longer.
That whole, you know, the like little village area it's kind of like the only green area of the map.
Yeah,
that whole thing is like a flag. So I don't know if it can be much bigger than that. Can it? There's so many times when I'm like on it trying to cap it, and there's someone defending it, and I'm like, okay, well, I've got to go check about 40 buildings to see where this dude is. So I don't know if I like that. I think maybe on like open flags it could work, but
yeah,
I
don't think it's a good change because, like you said, they're already quite large just because of how large the maps are, and again, it would just make the games so much longer. Because, there's that one little punk or even an AI that's camped out in this one corner that you did not check. And you're like, I've literally almost claimed this entire thing, and now I can't. And I have to go around searching. I'll probably get sniped or hit by a tank or a vehicle, and then there goes all of that progress.
Yeah. Yeah, I think it could work in some situations, but I agree. I don't know if that's I feel like that's not something that will fix anything. It's just going to be a pointless change.
Yeah, the only way I could see that working is like if they did it where you could claim a skyscraper on the bottom floor as well. I think that would add a really fun dynamic to where it takes away from the single defensible point and offers two ways that you have to capture a section.
Yeah, I agree with that. I think verticality is definitely a good way to, if they want to do that. Like even the main building, I'm not sure it would really work, but the main building on Kaleidoscope, if you could be anywhere in that building, for example, maybe that's too big, so I'm not sure that would really work to the same extent, but I know what you mean on, like, say, Hourglass, being able to cap at the bottom, or even, say, like, Orbital, there's, like, the 3 levels on that main big tower.
That's exactly what I was
stuff
thinking.
Like that. Yeah, that would be really fun, and I think that would add a bit more, like, good chaos of, like, I'm on the top and someone's capping. Are they up here? Are they in the middle? Are they down the bottom? I don't know. So then you kind of start, like, panicking and you're like, oh, geez, like, now I've got to go check all those areas. But it's not too big of an area that you're like, where the hell are they? You know they're gonna be in one of the 3 spots.
Yeah, I think stuff like that would be really good changes for the flow of the games.
Yeah, 100%.
Yeah, and then another thing is they want to make it more clear of the directions that you want to go to get to the objectives. And they say, you told us that you'd like to see this improved by lining up cover in such a way that it follows a clear path between objectives. This is something we're looking to update once we've finished moving base spawns and different flag locations closer together. You've also told us that several areas on the maps are underutilized and that they serve no purpose for travel. To address this, you can expect us to explore removing the most underutilized areas. A good example of that would be E1 on renewal, which we are reviewing to become an out-of-bounds area and to make an immediate improvement to pathing on that map. So this is good. I don't think in the before and after, it's the distribution center, and then they've removed it in the after section. I don't know, like, unless it's just an optimization thing, all those loaded assets are slowing the game down. Visually, it doesn't look good that it's just empty.
Yeah, that's a weird thing to show off it
Look, guys,
should
there's
almost
nothing
be
there.
before and after switched. Like,
Yeah.
realistically, you'd look at the first one and be like, oh, well, that looks way better.
Mm-hmm.
So unless they're going to move that to a different area, that could work. If maybe they put that in the middle of, like, you know, there's a lot of extra area that's just kind of empty inside the boundaries of that wall. Maybe they could move that and that would be fine. But if they just delete that whole section, that's...
Yeah, keep
I
it
don't
there.
know,
Just
like-
don't let people go over there. Like, you don't have to
Yeah.
remove it entirely to make it feel
Yeah.
so video gamey. Like, obviously, I know there's a set location where I can and can't go, and then as soon as I get there, like, it's not usable space. But still, like, I want to look over there and there still be things. Like,
Yeah, exactly.
add some
think-
texture.
Yeah, even if they, like, if it is to do with optimization, just, like, lower the quality drastically. Make it so you can't go into it, and then, you know, maybe the first row of those, like, the little buildings, have them high quality so that it looks like it's still HD, but then the back of it can just be literally empty.
Nothing, yeah.
and we don't see that. So, yeah, it's a weird change to me. I think I need to, like, see the actual map, so I can't really judge it at the moment, but I was confused when I first saw that. I was like, what? I don't really know what they're getting at, but yeah. The rest of the changes all seem positive, so I'm assuming that will be a positive change as well. It's just that it's really hard to tell at the moment.
Yeah. And then in terms of, like, when can we expect the first updates in game? And they said, discussed several changes today that will not only make to maps, but also to gameplay, such as how often or how many vehicles you'll see on the battlefield. First changes we'll make are to vehicle play and availability, and those will be ready in the next update. Following that, you'll start to see the first updates to flag, base spawn locations, and cover and line of sight on Kaleidoscope and Renewal. These changes will arrive during Season 1, and as we get closer to deploying those updates, we'll be able to share all of the specifics. We're now getting started on bringing these same standards of updates to our other launch maps, alongside needed visual changes to make all maps feel ready for battle. There's a lot of work in doing that, so you can expect us to start discussing more about those updates during Season 1 and for the changes themselves during Season 2.
Yeah,
By the time Season 2 comes out, that's like... When would that be? Like, if
that would pretty much be a year after launch. I'd imagine.
A year after launch, and, like, basically not a whole lot.
Yeah, it's that bit. I don't know. It sucks to hear, but it's also pretty much what I expected. So I wasn't that disappointed.
It's good confirmation, but it's not good in and of itself.
Yeah, so it's kind of a weird. It was like I was a bit torn between. That sucks, but I expected it, and at least we can hear it. At least we're not getting our expectations up too much. So I think that, you know, in terms of the maps, it sucks, but we've also got to remember we're getting, you know, season passes and stuff on the way. So hopefully that all just kind of distracts us from the maps. And it's hard to tell how this is all going to go. It's hard to tell whether it's going to be slow content or maybe they've been so slow because they're going to put out a lot of content. Like, it's just hard to tell. So,
yeah.
Going to be interesting to see.
And then finally, dude, this next, whenever we discuss the next core feedback, it's going to be fun because they're going to be talking about specialists. And they said, we're currently preparing a similar post for you as we've done for maps, and we're looking forward to getting that in front of you to open up that discussion. We know specialists have been a major topic for you, and we're looking forward to sharing with you what we've planned to improve their gameplay and fit into the world of Battlefield 2042. Lastly, we've received thousands of comments from you throughout March. I want to end with a thank you. They didn't actually say when is the next one.
Yeah, true. Oh, no, they said we'll return in a couple of weeks. The first sentence there.
Yeah,
which still is very vague, but...
A couple of weeks is normally 2. Several is more than 3. So probably in DICE terms...
Surely within the next 2. Yeah, actually, in DICE terms, we'll get it like after Season 1 or something.
Yeah, a couple in terms of DICE language usually ends up being 5 weeks. A month usually ends up being 2.
And a season equals a year.
Yep, exactly. I'm sorry, but DICE, you've become a meme. And Not in a good way.
Nah.
Just say what you mean, not give us a vague couple of weeks. Couple is usually 2. But yeah, and they've had thousands of comments, and I want to say I appreciate that they are going through all of the hate and the vitriol to get to the actual comments and changes and look at what's been going on. Because again, yeah, that person may have given you a death threat, and that is horrible, but they may have also had something decent to add to the game experience, which is a really hard sentence to say, but it is still like something that like there's comments out there and feedback that is being offered. Hopefully it's in a good way, but they are going through and looking through the Reddit. They're looking at all these different locations and saying, hey, we hear you. We see what's the most prevalent. We're going to work on those that we're hearing the most and also focus on bug updates.
Yeah, I think the actual dev team have had a rough time, but I think the community team has done almost as best as they can. They probably can be more active, but I think what they've done has all been pretty decent. Like they kind of admitted fault, and they're now doing these feedback loops. It looks like we're essentially going to get one every couple of weeks, because they're pretty much saying we're going to get like 2 a month. They'll do the first one, and then they'll talk about the follow up to that. So we've got the first one for the maps, then this one, then they've just said in a couple of weeks we'll do specialists. Then I imagine 2 to 3 weeks after that we'll get the next one for the specialists. So they're doing better, and I do appreciate the community team, because they must be going through hell. Like, I don't think any of us understand how hard that job would be. I've spoken, I don't want to name names, but I've spoken to some of the community team members, and they're not doing well. Like, it's taken a toll on their mental health. So they deserve a lot of praise for having to put up with not even just the death threats, but just like constant, even a tiny little negative comment, 100 of them every hour, that would get at anyone. I don't care how hard-headed anyone is. That's not easy to handle. So they've done a really good job, and I hope that they are being looked after by the company, because they probably need a pay rise, I'd imagine.
They need a pay raise. They need more people on their team so they can actually take vacations instead of feeling like, oh, hey, I can't do anything because my entire team is me and 2 other people. And these 2 other people are working on the next blog post, and they have to get that reviewed. Because like these people are the ones that are the first line of defense and the first visual people, and most of them like are on their own personal Twitter accounts. Like, I see you on the battlefield, Freeman, and it's got a link to his personal Twitter. So it's like they are the first line of defense. They are speaking to the people on behalf of the company using their own personal accounts, and they may say, hey, I'm gonna just scroll on Twitter for a little bit and keep up with my friends, but oh, hey, look, there's a death threat, and my day's ruined.
I see it like all the time. I see them tweeting about like, a new show, that like tweeting about a Marvel show, and they're just like, oh, I really like that episode, and then someone's just like, oh, I'm glad you like that. I absolutely hate Battlefield. And it's like, they can't even just have 2 minutes of peace on the internet. So it's I can't imagine being a community manager on any game, let alone a game like this, where it's people have just been completely toxic.
Not a fun time. But we appreciate you all, community people. If you know someone that does community or social management, give them a hug. They need it. But with that, thank you all so much for listening to this episode of The Battlefield Show. We greatly appreciate your support and your feedback. So if you'd like to leave feedback, hit us up on Apple Podcasts, leave us a review, as well as rate us on Spotify. You can find this show wherever you listen to podcasts. We'd like to thank Ethan Clark for the beautiful thumbnail. As always, thanks for listening, and we'll see you on the battlefield.